We're going to be looking at Buddhism and the spirituality that came out of South Asia. Basically, Buddhism is quite different than the other faiths ideas that we've looked at. It starts out with a man here. His name is Siddhartha Gautama. And unlike Hinduism, Hinduism doesn't have a founder. Buddhism has a founder, and the founder is essential in Buddhism. Siddhartha Gautama. Time period we're looking at is about 560 BC, well after Hinduism took ground in India. To give you Buddhism, I got to go way back to this man and the story that goes behind this man, because it really plays an important role in understanding Buddhism. Basically, Siddhartha Gautama was a guy who was next in line to be a local ruler. He was raised in a very, very upper class family. He had all the money he wanted. He had all the luxuries and desires he wanted as he was growing up. Fame, fortune, anything he had access to as he was becoming a teenager. He had all the women that he wanted in the area, and he had a life full of luxury. However, he ended up realizing all this money, all this wealth, all this luxury, it's still not dealing with the problem that I'm facing. I'm facing the problem of pain, the problem of suffering. That's the essence of Buddhism. To answer the question, how do you deal with the pain in your life? How do you deal with the suffering in your life, the despair that you see around you? Well, Siddhartha Gautama left his palace, and he saw all these people in sorrow. And he went beyond the walls, and he saw an old man, a sick man, a dead man, and a beggar. And these things were like, this is reality, this is real. And in my heart I have suffering, and money can't buy me all these things. And he actually lost his mother at a very early age, so death was something he was quite aware of. And he said, I need to leave the lifestyle that I'm living, because this money will not give me the answer to how do I deal with the pain and suffering in my soul. And if I can't answer that question, then what's the point of living? So he leaves the palace, and he actually does a 180. He goes way on this spectrum, on this end. And he said, if money and material possessions and materialism can't buy me happiness, well, I'm going to reject it all. So he leaves his palace, and he gets rid of all material possessions and all his wealth, and he says, I'm going to find the answer. And he says, if material things, the material world, can't find me suffering and is the cause of my suffering, I'm going to get rid of it. And he literally does. He becomes very poor, and because his body is material, his body is part of the physical world, he tries to beat up his body, and by beating up his body, it's a way of him saying, I can control my body, and I can then focus on my spiritual soul. You got to understand, Buddhism is entrenched and surrounded by the idea of Hinduism, that the body isn't important or as important. What's important is your atom, your soul, and that's where you need to focus. So he ends up beating his body up. How does he beat his body up? According to the story, he ended up for I guess months, maybe years, eating 1 grain of rice a day, so the story says. And he's barely can survive, and he's realizing this isn't the answer over here too, because I'm still focusing on my body, I'm still focusing on these desires, I'm just trying to mask it, I'm trying to beat it up, and I can't control it. The more I focus on beating up my body, the more I focus on my body, I focus on how hungry I am. So he realizes, well, that's not the answer. So he's growing in frustration. He says, I'm going to sit under this tree, and I'm not going to leave until I deal with, how do I solve the problem of pain? How do I solve the problem of human misery? What's the cause of that? And how can I deal with that? Well, as he is under the tree, he ends up gaining enlightenment. Enlightenment is the answer to the problem. Perfect peace. And from that, he becomes known as the Buddha. That's where Buddha comes in. Here's an image of him becoming Buddha, finding out what enlightenment is. And here he's sitting under this tree, and he finds perfect peace, and he can resist all the things all the desires of this world that cause human suffering. And let's explain, he has an answer to this. He has an answer on how to deal with the pain and suffering and the sickness that everyone suffers. It's called the Four Noble Truths. Okay? You need to know that term. It's very important. The Four Noble Truths. I'll write it down for you. The first one is this. Everyone suffers. Number one. Right here. Everyone suffers. You take the most popular person in the school, you take the wealthiest person in the school, you take the most athletic kid in the school, and you sit him alone, and when all of the stuff, all the distractions of this earth are gone, deep down inside he has some idea of despair. He deals with pain. She deals with sickness. And you're gonna have to face the fact that everyone dies. We all suffer. If you don't suffer now, you will suffer. Okay? Even pleasures cause suffering because they become your idol, they become your slave. So that's the first noble truth. Suffering is all around us. The second one is the cause of suffering is your self-centeredness, having your own individual desires. Basically, the mind is the cause of the suffering. That's number two. Your desires of this world are the cause of your suffering. Now, you might be saying, well, wait a second. You don't know what's going on in my life. I've been dealing with a lot of people verbally abusing me, physically abusing me. I've been very poor my whole life. I haven't had anything. I've been struggling. I've dealt with death at such a young age. I've dealt with close friends of mine abandoning me. You can't tell me the problem is me. The problem is them. To the Buddhists, they would say you're wrong. These things are tragic things that happen to you, but you are suffering because you're not looking at them correctly. Let me give you an example. Here's me, okay? And I am holding a cup of water. And here I shake the cup of water, and it ends up there's water on the ground. Now, if I asked you, what caused this mess? You would say, me shaking the cup. A Buddhist would say, no. What caused the mess isn't me shaking the cup. What caused the mess is the H2O in the cup, the water cup. And that can show itself in Buddhism. The problem is your mind. What's inside of your heart and how you think of things. That's ultimately the problem. What's inside the cup is ultimately the problem. Not necessarily the shaking of the cup. Let me give you another example to help you understand. This is the Schuylkill Expressway. We've all been stuck in the Schuylkill Expressway, maybe going to the beach, maybe going to watch the Flyers lose, you name it, whatever it is. Now, here I am. I'm in this car right here, and I'm stuck in the traffic jam, and I'm saying hi to the butterfly that flew by. I'm waving to the birds. I'm all chipper. I'm all happy. I'm loving this world. I'm whistling. I look over to the car over here, and I am waving to the passenger. This passenger is going to the Flyers game, and he is upset because he's stuck in the traffic, and Flyers fans can't control their emotions, so he can't control his emotions. So he's banging his steering wheel, he's banging his dashboard, he's screaming the top of his lungs, and I wave to him. He doesn't wave to me. He actually does something different than a wave to me. So here's the question. What is causing him to flip out? Now you could say, oh, it's the traffic jam causing him to flip out. But you can't say that. You can't say it's these outside obstacles causing him to flip out, because I'm in the traffic jam and I'm not flipping out. He's flipping out and he's in the traffic jam. So it's in his heart. It's how he's looking at the world around him that's ultimately causing him to have these feelings of despair and anger and grief. The third part of the Noble Truth is you need to eliminate your desires of this world. You need to get rid of your own interests, your own desires. Whether they're up here, money, fame, fortune, anything that's focusing on your desires, you need to get rid of. Now, a lot of people get this confused with Buddhism, and they'll say, you need to get rid of every single desire. That's not true. You just need to get rid of your desires of this world. You can't sit and say, okay, I'm going to have no desire, I'm going to have no desire, because then you start desiring to have no desires. The desires that you need to get rid of are your own. You keep desires, but the desires then are pointed to others. And this is the fourth point of the Noble Truth, and it's also called the Eightfold Path. So there's 4 points in the Four Noble Truths. The fourth one is to follow the Eightfold Path. This is number 4 in the Four Noble Truths. Now I'm not going to go over all 8 things, but the 8 things basically can be summarized with kindness, compassion, truthfulness. Kindness to others. Here you see the kindness and compassion. This is an interesting and important thing to understand. When you show compassion and kindness and truthfulness towards others, you have desire. Those desires are to show compassion, kindness, and truthfulness. But by showing compassion to others, you no longer have your own desires. Your desires are to serve others. So the point is, a Buddhist would say, when you're feeling depressed, when you're feeling despair, don't go to illegal drugs. Don't even go to legal drugs. Don't go to food. Don't go to anything that deals with focusing on yourself. Go to a soup kitchen. Go to a retirement center and play games with people that don't get to interact with younger people. Those are the things that you need to focus on. Those are the desires that you need to have. Desires on compassion, desires of kindness, desires of truthfulness towards other people. That way your focus is no longer on yourself, but it's poured onto other people. That is what solves the problem of pain, the problem of suffering, because you become part of a bigger thing that is beyond yourself. And when you do that, you achieve no longer your own desires. You reach a stage called nirvana. And that is when it's the state of wanting nothing, when your soul is at peace. And part of this process is through meditation as well. And you can see over here, you need to quiet yourself. You need to gain peace within and focus on your insides. Because if the cause of suffering is having desires and being self-centered and wanting the things of this world, you need to quiet your soul and exercise your soul and give yourself a break spiritually. And meditation is another important thing of Buddhism. There it is, the Four Noble Truths. The fourth is the answer to the problem, which is the Eightfold Path. That is the essence of Buddhism. Real quick, some things that make Buddhism different than Hinduism, because we are talking about South Asia. Buddhism believes, just like Hinduism, that there's this force that's all around us and it connects us all together. We're all connected. They believe in karma. What you give is what you get. Buddhists believe in reincarnation, or I should say most Buddhists, or the original Buddhists, believe in reincarnation, that your life is reborn. Some differences between Buddhism and Hinduism is Buddhism spreads much further away. It spreads into China. It spreads more down into East Asia, and then into Japan as well. So Buddhism spreads where Hinduism mainly stays in India. It is the fourth most popular religion. Some people debate even if it is a religion. I'm going to take the middle ground and say it's the fourth most popular spiritual viewpoint of the world. There's two other differences between Buddhism and Hinduism. Buddhism rejects the caste system, which we talked about, and Buddhism doesn't really emphasize anything about God. You can be someone that doesn't have a view towards God, and that's basically a Buddhist would say whether God exists isn't the issue to deal with. The issue is the problem of pain, and God is an important equation, whether he exists or not. So there's not an emphasis of God where Hinduism has more of an emphasis. There's Buddhism.